Well, thank you, Peter. We're here at the Castle Inn. Peter's kindly come along and helped us with our networking. How did you find it this morning?
Yeah, really nice. I mean, networking is something that I realised I used to do, but I didn't know it was networking. These days, now I'm sort of like a sole trader on my own, but still do bits of radio and things, but spend more time in the business world working like that. I really enjoy it. I think what's nice about this gathering, and I know you do it every month, and there's a charity angle, which is great. But actually, I think some networking meetings just happen because that's what their business is, if you know what I mean. This is actually a true group of very different business individuals brought together, good cause, to hear someone, unfortunately for them this time it was me, but to hear someone talk about some of their bits. And it feels very genuine, and you know that I like a particular word at the moment. It's very authentic. It's nice.
I'm smiling because you know that I run this sort of networking group pre-COVID and post-COVID. We make no money out of it. It's not what we do. Every penny goes to the charity. New Dawn Pubs, Castle Inn, they provide everything for free. And it brings everybody together in Farnham in a great environment with a view to hopefully everybody moving forward. Conscious we've only got a few minutes. I'll ask you sort of two questions we covered in networking again. What does the future hold from you? How can we help you?
Well, that's very kind of you to ask. I've sort of morphed into a strange. I don't really know what my business is, which in a funny sort of way I quite like, because it means that you're open to everything. So yes, I'm a media-based person, performance-based person. I do some acting, but I think the biggest thing I can help people with is around awareness, making noise in the nicest possible way, making people understand how they can move things on, because that's what I spend. I spend every morning doing that for my business and other businesses who used to advertise with us for years and years and years. So it's natural for me, and therefore whether it be media advice, how to make a better comm setup in your own company, how to understand things around values and business culture, which is very important in my previous life. Then I'm there for that, and I mean talking with you today at a networking meeting, doing some media training next week with a charity, working with people like Surrey Fire and Rescue with their frontline people around how to cope with interviews, but also working with a planning consultancy about how to get them out there more, as well as popping up on the BBC occasionally and other commercial radio. So I'm still doing the rounds, but I now have more time to actually spend on really properly helping other businesses and charities and organisations cut through.
And I think you've got a unique position at the moment. Um, Post-COVID, yeah, as you know, I'm an accountant and advise many businesses. They're all struggling the same way. Culture's gone out the window. Yeah, and it's almost like, and I may regret saying this, during COVID, everybody was very giving. And we've come out the other side and gone back to some degree of normality. And there's a degree of selfishness crept in. Um, I have this phrase, and I may regret saying this as well. Um, you've bought a ticket, you're on our bus. If you don't want to be on the bus, get off. But there seems to be a lot of people on a lot of buses just clinging on.
Yeah, on the bus is a great analogy. I've used that and still use it in business, particularly around values work.
Yeah.
Because you can do quite a lot of, when you're doing culture and values work, visualization is really important. And that bus thing, who's the driver, who's on the top deck, who's on the bottom deck, who's hanging on the pole at the back, as you say. But just going back to this whole pandemic thing, I've been rattling on about this to anyone that will listen. We are in, and will be for some time, post-pandemic shock. And I mean that in its actual form. So we're witnessing that, of course, with the financial situation all around us. Of course, you and I both know that as business people. But there's a personal shock. People were affected. People were affected hugely, personally, family members, in a frontline human way. That does not suddenly disappear. So that juxtaposition between going back into the office, metaphorically speaking, and the fact of where we were only months ago, really, is why I think everything's a bit disjointed. And people just genuinely need to remember we all remembered how human we were during that pandemic. That's the line. So hang on a second, guys. Now we're getting ourselves back together. Why do we suddenly decide that we're going to be something on, some business film? We're still those human beings. Let's see if we can draw on some of that work, because it was work.
Yeah.
Let's draw on some of that work to bring it into a better place going forward. And sadly, as you say, at the moment, I think people are struggling with that because they're struggling with their own shock. That's the truth.
It's probably worse than we're saying. Pre-pandemic, we had Brexit, which is still causing me some issues, but I would say they were work issues. And now we've got war in Ukraine and the worldwide situation. Inflation is running at double digits. I suspect today interest rates will hit 3%. And I know, talking to my clients and the individuals, they don't see an end to it. So there is a certain amount of panic on top of everything else.
Yes, there will be an end to it, but we're not very good at knowing when the end is, because we're not very good knowing when the good times are. We're really bad at that. One of my things is we've got to, at some point, pick a point where we go, do you know, so rather than going, gosh, it was better back then, well, that's no good to anyone now. We need to remember where we are. And the only way you get to that is pretty much what I was just talking about. It's if we actually properly behave as human organisations, you will begin to recognise now, because you'll have a different context.
Yeah.
It's been mad these last few years, Paul, and it happened before Brexit. We are still suffering. You know this. We're still suffering from 2008.
Yeah.
Everything came out of that. Brexit came out of that, and I'm really sorry, but one of the problems with Brexit, and it's now around us again, people aren't listening. Brexit happened not really because of any radical right thinking or whatever it may be, or even to a certain extent the immigration question. Brexit didn't happen on that. It's because Brexit happened because no one was listening. And it's still going on now. People are quite condescending to people around stuff. You shouldn't do that because it makes you look like that. Well, don't tell me that. Because I'll tell you what, I'm going to go and flipping do it. Just because every time I do, Brexit was the election that counted, as opposed to general elections, which year after year after year, particularly since 2008, never made any difference. It doesn't matter who I vote for. I vote for the Lib Dems. Well, hang on a second, they're in coalition with the Tories and they've forgotten their student cuts and bits and all that. I vote for Labour and actually all they do is they do this and that. Brexit was the big moment for right or wrong, and I understand the challenges, but we've got to remember that people will go with something if they think they can make a difference, and that's something we've got to remember now.
Indeed. I'm conscious we've got limited time. I will say to anybody who's listening, use Peter, give him a ring, he's open to a conversation. He's a good bloke, and as he pointed out this morning, he is actually a client of mine. For all of those reasons, thank you very much, young man.
Absolute pleasure, my friend. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Circulate, do what you wish.
Any more rolls?
There may well be.
Don't note that on camera. Thank you very much indeed. Good to see you. Thanks for listening. Thank you.